Okay, so today's topic is issue of Chamar Medina for Kiddush, and it's something that kind of fascinated me, not because of my personal practice. I mean, just like I've given a few talks about the Holocaust, and I've mentioned my family was not affected by the Holocaust, and I don't particularly care for schnapps, and I never make Kiddush on schnapps, but I find it very interesting that many people do, and there's a number of questions that this raises. So the whole thing is based on an incident that took place, as recorded in Gemara Pesachim, with Amemar. And Amemar was in some city, and it came time Shabbos was over. They wanted to make Havdalah. So normally, you make Havdalah over wine, and they didn't have any wine. The question, I guess, I also wonder over that incident: what happened on Shabbos? That they do it making Kiddush on Shabbos. But all right, it came to Havdalah, there was no wine around. So you're not supposed to eat if you don't make up until you make Havdalah. So he didn't eat. He went to sleep without eating anything on Tzai Shabbos. The next morning they bring him Chamar Medina. Okay? And he made Havdalah on Chamar Medina, and he was then able to eat. Okay, so what is Chamar Medina? Literally, Chamar means wine. Of course, Medina means country. So the wine of the country. So in ancient times, you had different countries had different beverages that they used for drinking. Now, let's get back to some question about what actually existed in ancient times. Like today, you get thirsty. So what do? You go to the ShopRite, let's say, and buy a 6-pack of Coke, right? That's what they did in time of the Gemara. Not exactly. There was no ShopRite and there was no Coke. Oh, okay, so maybe they could have gotten orange juice or apple juice or grape juice or something like that. Well, maybe, but did any of you ever try to open up a bottle of grape juice and then you drink some of it and you just leave it around, not refrigerate it, but just put it on the shelf and come by a few weeks later, and what's going to happen? It's fermented. It's fermented. Well, it turns. It's got a mold on it. It's not really. I mean, the word fermented could mean good things, that it becomes wine, but no, it won't become wine just by doing that. It's just going to spoil. So, in the time of the Gemara, today we have process of bottling, right? Where you can buy a bottle of grape juice, a bottle of apple juice, which is processed in a certain way to kill the germs, and it will stay basically forever until you open it. Of course, they didn't have that in time of the Gemara. The other thing you can do is, if you refrigerate it, it will keep pretty much indefinitely. Yeah, but they didn't have that in time of the Gemara either. So we have the interesting question, which has come up, of course, comes up all the time. Can you use grape juice for arba kosos on Pesach? Now, the general practice today is yes. Many people do it. I know I've done it sometimes, and it's generally accepted. But if you look at what it says in the Gemara, they raise the question, can you make Kiddush on grape juice? And the answer is yes, you can. But nothing is ever said. There's they don't raise the question, could you use grape juice for arba kosos? And then we have the story about a certain rabbi who wine, he was allergic to wine, that if he drank wine, he would get sick until Shavuos, or maybe even longer, and yet he still drank the wine in the Chaim mitzvah arba kosos. So the question is, why didn't he use grape juice? The answer, well, one possible answer is because you can't use grape juice, and therefore that wasn't a possibility. But if you think about what I just said, in the time of the Gemara, that was not a possibility. Grapes were harvested in the fall. So somebody could have taken some grapes and squeezed them and made grape juice, and then next few days he'll drink it. Maybe he'll use it for Kiddush, and that's the question. And we said we could use it, but Pesach, there was no way to keep grape juice for Pesach. You had to use wine because that was the only thing that was available. Okay, so in the time of the Gemara, basically any beverage was some kind of an alcoholic beverage, but not necessarily just wine. In other places, I think either Egypt or maybe Babel, they had beer. Beer was made from grain, also an alcoholic beverage. So that was another possibility. And that's presumably what was involved with the incident in the Gemara, where they had this beer, and beer was considered the national beverage, the beverage of the country, because in that country, beer was more common than wine. And the Meimar says, for Havdalah, you can use it if you need to. Okay, so that's the basis in the olden times. Now, what is the application of this today? Today we have a very different situation. So how do we define Chamar Medina today? So one approach is it's got to be alcoholic. All right. So you could use, if that's the case, you could use beer, and you could also use schnapps, right? Because those are both alcoholic. And so that would be the basis of saying that you can make Kiddush on Chamar Medina. Another approach that's, I think Rav Moshe Feinstein adopts approaches, it's got to be some beverage that's mechubadik to serve somebody. So with that approach, could you use soda? The answer given is no, because soda is not something that's dignified, but I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I've been to homes where I walk in and say, would you like something to drink? You have some soda. So it's not so obvious to me that that's not something that one would serve to a guest as a sign of respect. But the poskim seem to think, I guess they didn't drink soda, that it's not. On the other hand, there is a basis to say that tea or coffee could be Chamar Medina. After all, we drink a lot of tea, coffee. That's what we're drinking here right now this morning. And it's very common to drink tea and coffee with meals. And it's considered, at least some people consider it, that it's a sign of respect. If a guest come, you offer the guest a cup of tea. How you get that from Chamar Medina, I'm not sure. The Gemara doesn't say anything about respect, guests, it just calls it Chamar Medina. But let's see that work here. But there is certainly that is a basis that there are poskim that use that as their criterion. Would it be served to someone as a sign of respect? And with that criterion in mind, it's stated that you could at least be shas adchak. If there's nothing else available, you could use tea or coffee to make. Well, it's usually dealt with Havdalah, but then we'll come in a minute to the issue of Kiddush. The third. What was that? No, okay. The third approach. This is the one that to me. The third approach, which to me makes the most sense, is it refers to a national beverage, something that's commonly drunk in the country that you're in. Now, if you apply that standard, would tea and coffee apply? Probably. It's certainly something we drink regularly. What about schnapps? Does anybody here drink schnapps 3 times a day? How about 1 time a day?
No, but it's a hush of a drink.
A hush of a drink. Yes, it's a hush of a drink. I said yes. If you use it as an example of being something hush of, then it makes sense. On the other hand, if you're talking about a national drink, something that people commonly drink all the time, I'm not quite sure that it would work. Now, I'll digress for a minute and relate a story that I heard about Rabbi Twersky. You know, Rabbi Avram Twersky was well known as an expert in addiction. And so someone asked him a question. I like to have a little cup of schnapps every night with my dinner. Am I an alcoholic? Well, what's the answer? What, no, you say no?
I say no.
You say no.
If he can skip it.
If he can skip it, okay, that is exactly the point. The answer that he gave is,
What you said was, I would like to, not that I need.
okay, well, all right, maybe I should say, I have a cup of, all right. So then the question is, as you just said, could you skip it? What would happen if it didn't happen? So if you could still enjoy your dinner without the schnapps, then you're not an alcoholic. But if you absolutely must have that cup of schnapps with your dinner, then you're an alcoholic. Okay, yeah?
You mentioned Rabbi Twersky was asking a question about drinking. Actually, there was a priest. I don't know if you know the story. You know the story?
This is all right, I'll tell the story. The more well-known story with Rabbi Twersky is he was he first when he first became expert in this field, he was in Pittsburgh, and he used to be on the staff of a Catholic hospital in Pittsburgh, and he got to know the people there very well. So one day, a priest comes over to him and he says, "Rabbi, I have a problem. I'm an alcoholic, but according to the halacha, I have to say the mass, and I have to use wine for the mass. What do I do?" So he said, Rabbi Twersky said, "Okay, let me see what I can." So he knew the guy who used to be the Archbishop in Pittsburgh had become the Secretary of State of the Vatican or something like that. So he contacted him and he said, "We've got to help this priest. He can't drink alcohol. Can we use grape juice instead?" So this guy whom we knew talked to the Pope, who he also knew very well, and the Pope said, "Yes, okay, under these circumstances, you can use grape juice." And reported it back to Rabbi Twersky. And Rabbi Twersky told the priest, "Okay, you can use grape juice for mass." And then he said, "Tell the Pope you just did a big mitzvah." Anyway, so that's.
I heard he also said, the Pope said, if it's good enough for the Jews to use, it's good enough
For
for
me.
us too.
Yeah, I haven't heard, there's some various twists to that story, but the story is probably true in some form or other, because, yeah. Okay, so now we have the basic issues of Chamar Medina, and I pointed out, while under two of the three criteria, number one, it's alcoholic, number two, it certainly would be a sign of respect if a guest comes and you give him a little bit of schnapps, that certainly shows him respect. That would clearly constitute Chamar Medina. If you look at it as a national beverage, it's not as clear. I mean, people do drink schnapps in America, but if there were any alcoholic beverage besides wine, I would consider a national beverage, it would be beer. Not, I mean, remember, well, I guess we all go back to the time, yeah, Rheingold is as good to your taste as it is to you. No, it's as it is to your sirs, because it's brewed extra dry. Rheingold after Rheingold. You know, it was a commercial on the radio about 60 years ago when they used to have that kind of stuff. So it could be said that beer is a national drink. It's a little bit more of a stretch to talk about schnapps as a national drink. So now, let me, first I want to point out another thing. I started off with that story with a Maimar. A Maimar, remember the story was that he used the Chamar Medina for Havdalah. It didn't involve Kiddush, it involved Havdalah. So there's a question of, do we extend this to Kiddush? Now, almost nobody says you should use schnapps for Kiddush on Friday night. Friday night Kiddush is considered to be Doraisa and more significant than the Shabbos morning Kiddush, which is only Darabban. So we're talking basically about using schnapps for Kiddush on Shabbos morning, not Shabbos night. But even there, it's maybe a higher level than Havdalah. And then, but the second point is, in the story of Maimar, there was no wine available. He didn't eat after Shabbos because he couldn't make up there was no wine. And finally, the next day they bring him the Chamar Medina because they didn't have any wine. So how does that apply today? Now, I'll never forget, this topic was, when we had the Shifty program, learning program in our show. It's now been replaced by Sturba, but we had the Shifty program. They had these booklets, and we used to try to get some important guests to come and give a shiur every now and then. And on this topic of Hamar Medina, we got Rabbi Willig to come. Rabbi Willig comes in and he starts giving a shiur, and then he talks about these halachas, and he says, let me ask you all a question. Who here does not have wine or grape juice in their home? And well, let me ask you, does anybody not have either wine or grape juice in your home? I don't think so, right? So he says, okay, now let's go back to the Yamaimar story. In Yamaimar, they didn't have wine or grape juice. That's why they used Hamar Medina. But for you guys, you got the wine or the grape juice. So there's no basis for you to use Hamar Medina. You got to make kiddush on the wine or the grape juice if you have it. Well, that was what Rabbi Willig said. And that's, to me, seemed to be the end of the story until this summer. We have a rabbinic intern for the summer, Rabbi Michael Fagan. And he gave a shiur this between Mincha and Marv one day about the use of Hamar Medina, and he brought some very interesting sources, which I have over here, which I will now discuss with you. So the first source is Mishnah Berurah. Shemekachin al Sheikhar, V'davka v'mokum tahabei Hamar Medina. Dahainu she'ein yayin matzoi b'chol ha'ir b'shana hazu. He defines this only if there is no wine in the entire city for the whole year. Obviously, if we apply that criteria, certainly there's plenty of wine around our cities. And most people drink, well, I'll translate as beer, b'shar mashkin. Ve'im yesh sham yayin ela shehu b'yoker mikra matzor. And then he says, even if wine is expensive, it's considered to be available. So under that criterion, I mean, clearly today wine is not super expensive. We all can afford to buy whatever wine we need, or certainly if we use grape juice for kiddush. So that under that criteria, you would not be able to use schnapps and marmadina.
Daniel?
Yeah?
Okay, there was a period of time when they didn't have any wine. And that's why Havdalah basically was added to the Shemona Esrei.
Mm-hmm.
So they went for a long period where they didn't make Havdalah because they had it in the Shemona Esrei.
Okay, that could be. Okay, I was not aware of that as the case, but you may be right. Okay, but in any event, I mean, well, so if they didn't have wine, what did they do for kiddush? I don't know. All right.
Friday, the Kiddush on
Challah on Friday night, but it's generally said that for Shabbos day you don't use challah because challah is the essence of the meal, and on Friday night you have a special kiddush where you makadosh yom, where you recite psukim, but kiddush on Shabbos day is basically you make the bracha or a priyagofen, or you make the bracha amol min haaretz, but that's, you have to make the bracha amol min haaretz if you're eating a meal. So generally it's said that it's preferable to make on Shabbos day kiddush on Hamar Medina, whatever that may be, rather than on the challah. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer exactly. All right.
That would only apply back then. Today, Yeshua Esrei allows you to go into your car.
No, right. We do say that. Yeah, you can do malacha after you say Hamavdil in the Shemona Esrei, or if you just said Baruch Hamavdil because that would work also. But you're not supposed to eat until you actually make the Havdalah. Okay. So now the next source here we have here is Igros Moshe Feinstein, where it says, remember I mentioned he says it's Hamar Medina. So only in an extreme circumstance can you do this. The gum, because of Rak Dak, all right, so and the chain vada mina royal befrat shemedino seinu Motzu yayin. Although mikol makom im nizdamin she'ein lo yayin v'lo shum mashka acher ela tei b'cholav yachal lismoch al mekilim b'avdol b'kiddush pas. He says make kiddush on bread, but I've seen the opposite being said. Okay, now next Magen Avraham. Nearly the ein mekachin al yash. Ella im came b'mdino sherov shesias hamon he yash bechol yom. So he's saying you shouldn't make kiddush on schnapps unless you're in a country where most people drink schnapps every day. And I suspect that the United States would not qualify as such a country. There are alcoholics, but most people who are not alcoholics don't drink schnapps every day, or certainly not, with every meal. Now, next source, Mishnah Berurah, Al HaSheichar says, "Ve'im chaviv lo yain saruf." If schnapps is something that's really dear to you, something you really enjoy, yachol l'kadesh olav bayom l'chatchila. You can do is in the first instance, even if you have wine, you could use schnapps. B'medina seinu shehu chamar medina. Okay, in our country, this is chamar medina. That's what he says. And now he continues. Ach sheyizaher likach kos machzik revis. You got to have a cup that has a revis. Revis is like 3 to 4 ounces, right? The leash does me menu malo lugmav shehu rov revis, and you got to drink most of that revis. And then he says, over the evet obishas adchak she'ein yachol leash does malay lugmav. No, again, most people when you drink schnapps, you drink a little shot glass, right? You don't drink 4 ounces of schnapps, and it's something that it's just almost impossible for most people to do. So what can you do? So he says, if you can't drink that much, and you don't have any wine, if you got 5 people there and each one drinks 1 ounce, then you consider putting it together, and now you got enough of the shiur. Which is a rather interesting way of doing it, and he says this is b'shas adchak. Okay, so now another approach, or chaim. Nearly the yain saraf shebedino seinu eino bichlal zeh. The bezeh he efshor lishtos revis halub shehu beitzu mechsa. The imkain azli basar shiur hashtil rov meir bezeh. So the Or Chaim here is saying, Taz on Or Chaim. Taz is saying it's impossible for most people to drink 4 ounces of schnapps, and that's what's required, and therefore you can't use it. Now, another source, Mar Sham, Avohei Livnei Tamid Chacham Zaken, Shahaya Be'atmo B'mama B'nei Hagag Abezdin something, Shetziva L'Talmidav L'Kadesh B'yom Al Yash. So he told his Talmidim, this great Talmid Chacham, Gon HaKadosh, Al Sluchis Katan, Gederach Siyaso, the Ein Sarech Shiur Kos. So this guy, who was apparently a well-known Rav, said, it told Talmidim to make Kiddush during the day on schnapps on a small cup, as it normally is used. The Ein Sarech Shiur Kos. V'hagam shahaya lefanav yain al shulchan amar shebachabdehu biyash kedei laharos halacha letalmidim. Whoa! So this guy says that even though you got wine on your table, if you think that this schnapps is more mechubed, you can make kiddush on the schnapps and a small little shot glass. So there is at least a basis for doing it. That's what I'm saying. These sources were really eye-opening to me, because when we learned it in Shifty, we didn't have any, or at least we didn't learn any of these sources. Now there's another source here, which is even more unusual. This is something called Kobus Amatora Mahadura Basra. Umei Peros, She'enon Mizayin Mashkin, not 7 fruits. Dino Ka'ochel. It's considered to be not a drink, but food. Shiuro Kazayis L'chuliyam. And therefore, since it's food, the shiur is only a kazayis. L'fi zeh, ola yafa minhag Yisrael l'kadosh b'yom Shabbos kodesh al slichos katan shel yash. So he says, if you say that that it's ochel, then the shiur is kazayis. Kazayis, all right. So so even with the kazayis, there's a question, but. What is so he says v'yesh lichmal gam kein adei shir zayis who shlish pesa 1/3 of an egg the whole sluchis katan machzi kazek yadu. So 1/3 of an egg a shakles would hold that much. So but the other approach here, which is Sharei Rachamim, and again these sources are just really unusual, and I don't know how Rabbi Fagan found them, but I just found this to be extremely fascinating, putting this all together. Sha'alti im l'kanesh al yash b'Shabbos shachris. The Omar Li she'eno mashke. It's not a mashke. I guess the meaning here is mashke is something you drink to quench your thirst. Wine could be considered to be, beer could be, certainly orange juice, tea, soda, but schnapps. Do you drink schnapps to quench your thirst? Not exactly. And therefore, it's not even considered a mashke. And the Yoser Tova Kadash al Sheikhar im Chavivola. So rather you use beer where you could drink beer to quench your thirst. So I'm not passing the halacha. And again, it seems to me that the proper approach is probably to use wine if you can. But there is at least some basis here to say that it's possible to use the schnapps for Kiddush on Shabbos, even l'chatchila, and even if all you're drinking is a shot glass.
Have you seen milk mentioned any?
Oh, milk, yeah, milk. I did mention milk. Yes, the answer is yes. Milk is considered to be in the category of tea and coffee, it seems. And there's another factor with milk. There is some basis, as the story we have with Deborah and Sisera, where they fed milk to, what was the name? Yeah, and it was, milk is somehow considered to be intoxicating to some extent. I'm not sure how, but there is some basis for saying that. So therefore, some people, even if you think you got to use something intoxicating, you could use milk. At least that's stated. Yeah. So that is a possibility. Yeah.
I know it's very popular on orange juice.
Okay. Yes, orange juice actually, some people say is fine on the basis that it really is. First of all, it's something that's mechubed, not like just water or soda. It's more mechubed than that. It's a national drink that we drink all the time here in the United States. So yeah, there definitely is a basis for using orange juice, and it could be considered more significant than tea or coffee. So yes, not intoxicating, but you could, under this logic, definitely use orange juice. If you eliminate the factor of intoxication, orange juice should definitely work.
There's a big argument of the Gemara on what roughly to make an orange juice.
Whether it's borate. Yeah, okay, well, that's something I'm not going to get into. I don't, right, because it contains the whole orange kind of, but it's squeezed and therefore, so, okay. All right, how do I turn this thing off now? Oh, thanks. I have no idea of what to do now. I guess Mendy will come and turn this off. You enjoyed that?
Yashikoa,
Oh, thank you.
great job, enjoyed it.
Very inviting. I do want to give Rabbi Fagan credit for the last part of the year. He came up with some really amazing choices. Okay, thanks. All right. Are you gonna shut this off?
Yeah.
Not pretty, I think.
Very good.
You didn't even have any notes other than using this last month. What about?
Gonna have more spots available next month.
I'll let you know.